A friend of mine sent me this thinking it would be an interesting story for me to make a film about. The planting of that seed took me on a year-long journey.
One of the things that was always a part of them growing up, and still is the family reunions. And they would be driving up Afton Mountain, and the older boys had to get out and walk because the car would not make it up the mountain.
The Cason Pittman families have traced their roots more than most. They pride themselves on their history and have been hosting annual family reunions for the past century. This is the story of an American family and what it was like to grow up in a different time.
I'm Carolyn Dawn Cason Talley. I was born November 26, 1954. My father is Lee Haston Cason, and my mama is Hilda Hope McCauley Cason.
I'm Dixie Cason Peterson. My daddy was Lee Cason. He's the only one of the Cason brothers who's passed away now.
I have 21, I believe, cousins on the Cason side, and there's all their children and their great-grandchildren and on from there.
Yeah, I'm Charles Cason. This is Francis Cason. And
this is Carolyn.
Barbara Cason. I'm Jack's wife.
I married the oldest sister, Nancy Cason, and I'm related by marriage. That's it.
Magic.
It's been a ball game all the way. Nancy and I've been married for 50 years, 52 years.
54 years.
54 years. I'll get it right in a minute.
I'm Isabel Cason, and I'm married to Ezra.
You're the oldest guy here today?
Yeah.
How old are you, Ezra?
I'm 89.
Life's good.
If I make it to my next birthday, I'll be 90.
She's another one of Ezra's great-granddaughters, Caitlin.
How much do I get paid?
my grandmother sent these pictures to Aunt Lucille up here.
Hey, would you just mind if I asked you who you are and how you related to the family?
I don't really know how we're related to the family.
Okay.
Billy Cason is going to play his harmonica. So stick around. So everybody stick around and listen to it, okay?
Nancy Cason, and I have 7 brothers.
My name is Billy Cason.
I'm George. I'm the favorite one around here.
I'm the 5th child.
Ralph Cason. Born in 23.
I'm Jackson P. Cason. I'm number 3. I'm number 6 boy.
All right.
My dad was the middle of the 7 Cason brothers, and he died 25 years ago, January of 1982.
I'm a second child, second brother. My name is Leonard Ezra Cason, Jr. I was born at Ivy Depot, Virginia. That's about 5 miles west of Charlottesville. I was born June 12, 1918.
I'm Charles Coulter Cason. I was born April the 1st, 1920.
I'm Ralph Cason. I was born February the 18th, 1923. Like my doctor said long ago, I'm surprised you're still living.
My dad was born March 20th, 1925. His name is Lee Haston Cason. He used to kid us sometime and tell us his middle name was just, the H was for handsome instead of Hanson. He was the middle of 7 brothers, the Cason brothers. They were all born at home, I believe, out on the Stony Point Road.
I was born November 13th, 1927. Today happens to be my birthday.
Happy birthday.
And I'm 80 years old today.
Good for you.
You believe that? I'm the 5th child in our family to be born, the 5th one. Ezra, Charles, Ralph, Lee, and myself. Then Jack and George. Then Nancy.
My name is Jackson Pittman Cason, Sr. Got 1 son. And I was born October the 23rd, 1929, the day before the stock market crashed. Maybe that's the reason it crashed. I don't know.
I was born October the 3rd, 1931. I'm the 7th of 7 boys. I think I was my parents' favorite son. And I think I'm my brother's favorite brother. I believe that's the way it goes. Billy's ugly. Jack, he's next to him.
I'm Nancy Jean Cason Roberts, and I was born on the Stony Point Road outside of Charlottesville, Virginia, in September the 21st, 1936. I'm the 8th child of Mary Lee and Leonard Ezra Cason, Sr.
So you're the youngest.
I'm the youngest, yeah. And this is a picture of my mother and father. This was taken like in the 60s.
My father was born in 92, and my mother was born in 1900.
My grandfather, grandmother, and my mother, between the 2 up on top, that's my mother. She was 7 years old then.
And they were married in 1917.
They were married in August. My mother wasn't 17 until September.
What were your parents like?
Well, they were like all parents, I guess. Strict parents and working parents. So.
Were your parents religious?
Yes.
Oh, they were great. They had it tough.
My daddy was a hard worker, and my mother was a hard worker.
My father had a small farm, 19 acres, on the Stony Point Road.
He did a lot of odd jobs, but he was a farmer, and he was a carpenter.
We worked on apartment buildings, houses, churches. He helped to build Marcella Hotel.
He would rent a lot of plots of land where we could plant crops like corn, you know.
We sharecropped neighbors' farms.
He worked for other people.
He bought a 1924 Model T Ford, and but before that, transportation was horse and buggy.
He would take the team of horses and go into town and mow the fields for people. Sometime I would ride with him. We'd take a lunch.
My mother, she was the glue that kept us all together.
She had a sewing machine operated by foot foot pedal.
Singer sewing machine.
She made the boys' clothes.
She taught me to sew some of my doll clothes.
I wore dresses until I was 2 years old.
Good nutritionist. She knew had the right food to eat.
My dad was he was pretty hard on my brothers.
He was a tough dude, but anyway, it was necessary.
We do have chores else, you know. We get a little spanking.
I came home one day and Mama says, Leonard, I want George whipped. He misbehaved all day long.
My dad called it a thrashing. He said, boy, if you don't do what I tell you to do, I'm going to give you a good thrashing.
So he grabbed a limb off her dogwood tree and started thrashing me.
Daddy, he didn't show you no mercy. When he whipped one of us boys, he whipped us all. And left us for dead. And I think probably we needed it.
But all this, I wanted George whipped. I thought I was whipping George. Anyway, he said, well, Jack probably needs it too. So that was it.
And Ma would take up for us. She was a good loving mother, you know. And sometimes she may not show she was loving you, but she was.
One time I got out of a good whipping. I was hollering so loud he thought he done whipped me.
He was a hard worker, and a hard man, really. But mostly fair, yeah.
A lot of times we'd be dressed for school and Daddy said, son, you got to take them clothes off. We got work to do today.
And it caused me to fail a couple grades.
It was sort of quick. I mean, maybe a year or so that he suffered a little bit, but.
My father's brothers, a lot of them drank and were kind of rough characters, but my father never did drink. He smoked some.
Because he had heart trouble. He'd smoked since he was like 8 years old.
My father was 80.
He passed in 1973 in January.
My mother passed away when she was 88.
She died of natural causes. Yeah, my mother never was very sick in her life at all.
Yeah, my mother passed away in 88.
And this is my mother.
Oh, wow.
And, that's my grandmother on the Queen Mary. Right here.
This is Mom and Dad's 50th anniversary.
And this is at the 50th anniversary of their parents.
This is the anniversary with Mom and Dad and all the boys and girls.
My parents with 4 children, Ezra, Charles, Ralph, and Lee.
It looked to me the centennial cake, all of that beards there.
Things of my mother's.
My mother had caught a rabbit fever one time. That was a sad thing. Skinning a rabbit, and she had a cut on, maybe a nick or something on her hand, and it got in her bloodstream.
Old Anton went to war, the craziest man I ever saw. He buttoned his britches over his coat and rammed his shirt tail down his throat. Get out the way, old Dan Tucker, you too late to get your supper.
My father gave that to my mother for her 16th birthday.
But she really got weak, and she was in the hospital like 3 weeks.
My mother sung a song to me when I was small. That's where I learned to sing it at. My mother sang.
And that's her hairpins and some other pins of hers, a spoon pin up there, hat pins, and a silk handkerchief that my brother Ralph had brought back to her, and a pair of her gloves. And then this is a handkerchief that was my aunt's. He'd push his chair back and put out his hands, and I'd sit up in his lap, and his old sweaty shirt, you know, where he'd been working all day and everything, but I loved it. Yeah. And he rolled those cigarettes. I remember him rolling the cigarettes. That's a fond memory.
When I went in service, I missed my mother a whole lot too. You don't know until you get away from them for a while, you know.
It was a pretty good life.
They started off at only 3 rooms in 1917 when they bought this place for $1,200.
That was on the gate. My mother painted it. She loved to paint things with fingernail polish too.
It was blue. All along there, but you can't see it today.
Did he build it himself?
Yeah, he built it himself, yes.
Our house was right down on the creek over top of the building with a U-10 roof. Big 2-story house. Dad added to it.
And it's still down there?
No, it burned down.
Our driveway was more than a half a mile off the road.
And we all lived right here.
No plumbing, no lights, no electricity.
We had the outside potty john, you know.
A stove in the kitchen. That's all the heat we had.
At first we had our kitchen down in the cellar.
When they went there, it was just 2 rooms. And my daddy added all this, like, you know, piecemeal.
Around 1930. With so many kids by that time, you know, we were running out of rooms. So he built one big room and with a upstairs to it.
It had 2 double beds, I remember that. And I guess it was the same downstairs.
He added on the kitchen.
But myself, my daddy had me right beside him. Right beside him. There was enough room to him, and I had an iron crib.
Well, sometimes there were 2 in the bed, and sometimes there was 3 in the bed.
You can't get much closer than that.
My parents' bedroom, and then what they call like the parlor, your nice living room with French doors and all, and that we didn't go in there and bother much in there. We had our Christmas tree in there at Christmas and that kind of thing. Then we had another room that was a dining room, a big room that was like a den, and in the kitchen it wasn't small actually, but it wasn't huge, I guess.
I imagine there was a lot of playing and rock throwing and chasing and racing and things that went on, going back and forth there to catch the school bus and after school.
The Easton family that lived over at the orchard, they were really nice neighbors. We helped each other a lot.
Everybody had a chore. Carry water from a spring, or either you worked in the wood pile, or you fed the pigs, or you milked cows.
A gallon of milk, you had that much cream.
So the boys grew up pretty happy on the farm there. I think, you know, there's a Alabama song that says something about we were so poor we didn't even know there was a depression, and they were like that. They didn't have, you know, they didn't have a lot, so they didn't know they weren't getting a lot.
We had plenty to eat, though.
A lot of cousins came to live there too, off and on. My grandmother Leonard and grandmother Mary had several brothers and sisters, and sometimes they weren't able to take care of their kids in the big city.
There'd be 12 of us at the table.
I imagine there was a lot of eating going on with these young guys.
We had all the apples and peaches we could eat, and cherries, and fill the cellar up with canned goods.
What they call a dry cellar. And we had food all winter.
Had a root cellar, potatoes, oh yeah, full of potatoes, sweet potatoes.
I remember my mother canning, and
She canned blackberry jam in half-gallon jars.
she was in that hot kitchen with that hot wood stove, you know.
And we had to cut wood for the stove.
We had an ice box outside on the back porch.
Daddy would buy, when he bought beans, he'd buy 100 pounds at a time in the sack.
The only thing we had to buy was kerosene oil for the lamps and sugar and flour.
Ain't nothing no better than cornbread and butter.
Made 50 gallons of apple butter each year.
Biscuits and butter, peach jam, blackberry jam on it.
We'd kill our own hogs.
Grew our own vegetables in the garden.
Make our own sausage.
We made homemade ice cream. We made that a lot.
Yeah, we had peach ice cream.
That wasn't just something that was just every now and then. We made that quite often.
I bet that was good.
It was.
Sometimes banana, but yeah, the peach, yeah.
Cured our own hams.
We'd eat a lot of squirrels, but didn't eat many possums.
We made souse meat.
Now, there ain't much meat on a squirrel, man.
Well, yeah, but you killed 8 or 10, 12, 15 of them. feed the whole family. And then she made the dumplings too.
Liver pudding.
Mama made cottage cheese.
Peas.
We had a lot of chickens.
Eggs.
She baked pies and cakes and
pork.
Eat oatmeal.
Ham, shoulder.
Fatback.
All kinds of good vegetables.
And black-eyed peas.
Cakes and pies.
And butter beans.
Cornbread.
And beets.
And beans.
Plenty of corn. We raised a lot of corn.
The ice box where the ice was that we kept, you couldn't keep much in there. It had 2 doors, but you could just keep a few things, maybe some eggs and something.
Good cold buttermilk was the best thing I ever had for milk.
Hauling water was always a big deal. They did not have electricity or running water in the house, and they had to haul the water from the spring.
And they had a trough in there that we kept the milk and butter and all in the trough below the spring.
Mama would say, go up and get the thing of buttermilk, or go up and get the container of butter where she had churned.
Do you still drink buttermilk?
No, you don't buy no buttermilk.
One night, the light blew out or went out, and there was only one pork chop left in the middle of the table, and all of a sudden you heard a scream, and when they turned the lights back on, there was one of them's hand, they might say George or Jack or whoever, the hand was in there with 6 forks stuck in it. And I'm sure that is not a true story, but it was something that they created or told about and laughed. And
we'd pick up apples, store them in the basement where they wouldn't freeze. And then long February and March, my father would say, okay, boys, let's go down and polish up some apples.
We raised a lot of collie puppies. My daddy would sell them around town, different places.
We picked 5 bushels of blackberries one day.
And that would enable us to buy all of our shoes and school clothes.
I didn't like it. I didn't like the berry picking. I didn't like anything that got my hands dirty.
Daddy would take them blackberries into town, sell them for 3 cents a quart.
Father worked on the farm some, but he left it up to the boys to do a lot of the work.
We used to grade yards and landscape with a team of horses.
Grew up during the Depression. It wasn't easy. We were always classified as poor people, and we were poor.
I was working for a day, but 75 cents a day.
A lot of times we didn't get a pair of shoes until after the frost.
Bad situation back then, but we got through it.
We had a spring about 500 yards away. We had to carry the water from that spring.
Jack and George was assigned to bring the water from the spring. And they would play around the way after dark. And I would have to go and help those get the water. We'd have to light our lantern and go get the water.
Down in the backyard had an iron pot, and we had to get the water out of that creek and put it in the iron pot. We had a fire built under the pot.
That was one of my jobs that I had to do, was help my mother with she would fill the lamps, but she didn't like a chimney with any smoke on it at all.
I had to milk 3 cows at least once a day, and we took turns.
I never could learn to milk a cow. They tried and they tried to teach me, and then I just got to where I said, I just don't want no part of it. I helped my daddy with different things, and one of the things was to help him in the garden.
Lee had a chore of feeding the pigs too. Sometimes he was late getting that done. When Dad got home, the pig wasn't fed. It was bad news.
Of course, some of my brothers said, "Oh, you had it so good. You didn't have all these chores and things to do like we did." But I did have to help my daddy. When he called for me, I had to run.
Try canning all day.
And my sister Nancy, every time I'd go to give her a switching, she'd run to Mama and get under her apron. Spoiled rotten.
We all went to church on Sunday, Presbyterian Church, Charlottesville.
Whenever we had good transportation to go, we went to church, all of us.
High Street Baptist Church on High Street.
When we go to church, we'd go by the Elliott Ice Company and pick up a big, huge block of ice with ice tongs. They were always in the car.
Well, if Ezra or Charles was in town, they'd pick up 50 pounds, bring it, put it in the ice box.
I can just see my mother now going out and chipping off some of the ice because she was a real warm-natured woman.
And put it on the bumper of the car, of the Model T or the Model A. Half of it melted before we got home with it, but you know, it wasn't that far either. But
I started school in 1925. I was 7 years old. I couldn't start any sooner than that because they were building Venable School, and McGuffey was crowded, and so they couldn't take me because I was in the county, and that was a city school.
What was it like going to school in the Depression?
it was tough.
Stony Point School, which is an old building. It didn't have water. It didn't have lights. It didn't have heat. We had a coal stove in each room. Wow. And we had to take our turn bringing in the coal and keeping the fire going. And
school would start in September. We'd go barefooted up until way up into October.
Otherwise, we're barefooted going to school to start with in the fall.
Had to walk to school in good weather, barefooted.
I do remember my dad and his brothers talking about walking to school when they were younger, starting with the older ones, Ezra and Charles and Ralph and my dad. They had to walk from their home place all the way to McGuffey School, which was pretty much in downtown Charlottesville.
Did you have to do any barefoot walking to school?
No.
Some of the
And they didn't either.
On frosty mornings, it was sort of bad going across the bridge because they had the metal treads for the automobiles.
The older boys said they did.
They did because they wanted to.
And you had to walk fast.
We had church shoes. We didn't just have just the one pair of shoes.
But standing in there before that, down there on that road, waiting for a bus with no shoes, cold. And it was cold walking down that road too.
We lived 3 miles from McGuffey School, and we had to walk.
Pretty much never had lunch. Well, if we had it, it would be a collard sandwich. And,
you know, the collard greens?
Collard greens, yeah, and cornbread.
All the people in town had special lunches, and the only thing we had was biscuits and homemade biscuits with apple butter or sausage or something like that on them. But anyway, some of them got to know us, and they liked that. They'd trade their ham sandwiches and bologna sandwiches and things to us for a biscuit, sausage biscuit.
A friend of mine, Ed Shifley, he always come in with a sack, heavy sack, you know. And I said, I'm gonna trade that boy out of that lunch. and finally, after weeks, months, he agreed he'd trade me. He'd trade me his lunch for that collard sandwich. And you know what was in that sack when I got it? A claw hammer and 2 hickory nuts.
How'd you get to school?
School bus. And we lived on the end of the line here. And my brothers, Ezra, Charles, Ralph, 3 of my brothers drove the school bus.
I was about 16, I think it was, 17, yeah.
The older boys started driving the school bus is the reason they stopped going to McGuffey and started going to Stony Point. So they all went to Stony Point School.
And I had to drive from 20 miles south from Carter's Bridge to McIntyre School.
The first one that they had was old International with a cloth top, you know. Wasn't a metal top. And that would break down on the coldest morning. It would freeze up. And we'd be waiting for the bus in all that cold weather.
I had to pick up a lot of children. And a lot of times the children would misbehave. It was the wrong thing I done. I used to put them off, make them get up. And they had to walk to school, because they wouldn't behave themselves.
1940, I'd start driving school bus. And I was the richest kid in the school because I was making $8 a month.
I was going to be turning 6 on the 21st of September, and you had to be 6 by September 1st.
I got to school before 9 o'clock, but I had to wait till 12:30 before I could get to class, because I just had to sit in the hall and wait my turn for the classes to change. It was so crowded.
And my mother eradicated the 2 off of my birth certificate.
They were supposed to be building a new school. They had to jack up the old school, which was a 2-story building. Had to jack it up, all the pupils in the school, and moved to the highway to make room for the new building. And that took several months to jack up the school and move it 1 inch at a time.
I realized he meant they literally moved the school. They jacked it up. The kids are in the school, and they're like, it takes days. They move it several inches a day, and they move the school with the children in it.
The new building, we had water and bathrooms and heat.
I think it was in the 8th grade that I lost 59 days from school, and I still passed my grade.
My dad dropped out of school probably in 8th or 9th grade. Education was never anything important in that family. I mean, survival was important.
In fact, I was the only one that graduated from high school. And the war came on.
It was a joy getting back home from school. I love the countryside. I mean,
we'd sit in a chair, close to the stove, not too close, but and for Santa Claus, and we'd get maybe a pair of gloves. We'd get a couple of oranges, some candy, and some raisins. They had bunches of raisins still on the stems. Maybe we'd get some socks for Christmas. And we always got some firecrackers. Now they don't give kids firecrackers anymore.
Back then, you could go into the 10 cents to the dime store, and they had all kinds of fireworks in there. If you was 4 years old, you could buy all the fireworks you wanted. And I'm talking about 5-inch firecrackers. That's like dynamite. And back in the 60s, you could go in any hardware store and buy all the dynamite you wanted, and caps.
Tell me about spinal meningitis.
Oh, I had that when I was 14.
he was in the hospital a long time. They didn't want to take him in at first. They turned him down. And my dad said, "You're going to take him else or else."
And the doctor told my daddy that I wouldn't live till morning. So I made it.
I was in the 4-H club, and I had a corner.
I was in the 4-H club at school.
One time I put off about 10 holes at one time.
I bought a calf for $1.
And I had this plunger, and I had enough, maybe 150 feet of wire. I'd get under this tree stump. When I put off that charge, rocks this big coming right down, right beside me.
I won the prize or whatever you call it.
I'd take the shotgun. And just a little boy too.
Oh, at night we went possum hunting, coon hunting.
Never forget the first one I ever shot. It was straight up over my head. That thing, when I shot that thing knocked me down, threw the gun back behind me.
Now, could you eat raccoon?
It was good.
I killed a squirrel. I'd like to kill meat along with it.
George and I were by ourselves for a long time, just the two of us there. And he was 5 years older, so he was teasing me all the time about something. And I'd run to Mama, and she used to take that iron and say, "Y'all get out of here." This is me with my Shirley Temple curls.
Look at those curls, man.
Well, I was scared of my own shadow. I was scared of the dark, but that had to do a lot with my brothers. They would get sheets on their heads and jump out from behind doors.
And this is a picture of you when you were 3 over here?
Right here, yeah. That's what.
I didn't like some of the sounds at night. The wolves howling or something, I didn't like any of those sounds. I didn't like growing up in the country.
I learned how to tell time on this clock here.
Is it from your house?
Yeah.
Your original house?
Oh, yeah.
When sometime I had a playmate, a cousin or somebody come to visit, we had these pretty rocks on the creek, real big rocks, and we would put our bathing suit on and go out and pretend we were on the beach. And
I drop a lot of fish.
we had a lot of pretty ducks on the creek.
Oh, like that.
Old damn Tucker, he got drunk and he fell in the fire and he kicked over a chunk and a red hot coal got in his shoe and look old girl tried to ashes through.
Before we moved in the country, we had generated electricity. It was very, 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 very large piece of equipment. But it was so noisy that we had to put it up. We had to put it up on the hill. He would turn on the light, turn on the generator, but all the lights in the house came on. We had light bulbs, hanging. You had lights on. Even if you didn't want no lights on, you had lights on.
My dad always had a place on his thumb that was kind of funny looking. The nail didn't grow right, and he told the story about how he and Ralph would play cars in the dirt out by the house, and I think he had a hatchet, and
he had told Lee to put it on the chopping block, and he would chop it off, and he said, "Okay."
They had a miscommunication, and that went the thumb.
Ralph, I think, comes running up to the car, and he had Lee's finger tip into his finger in his hand.
But I think having no TV made childhood a lot more fun for kids when they were growing up. They were able to go out and go swimming in the creek or wading or jumping off, trees and cutting each other's thumbs off, with hatchets and all those kind of fun things that kids like to do.
I started school in 1942, and my brother Ezra was already in the military.
In 1941, we always did the Christmas wreaths and Christmas trees and stuff. And we was running cedar to make wreaths back on December the 7th, 1941. And when we came back from where we picked them in the country, the streets were full of boys hollering, "Extra, extra, read all about it. War, Japanese has bombed Pearl Harbor." 2 of the oldest Eastern boys came over with a shotgun on his shoulder. They were mad. And one of the boys, Richard Easton, the very next day joined the Marines.
The baby picture. Right there, he's me running in the Air Force.
And here you are today on your birthday.
Yeah.
80 years old. I want to make it to 80. That'd be great.
It's hard to believe it's 80.
Yeah, it's a lot of years. That's a lot of things you've seen.
1941 then, I got my draft notice.
Just before my brother went in, before Ezra went in, just before he went into service, they were all baptized.
So I enlisted in the Air Force.
You let me go at first, and then they drafted me.
Was that because of the spinal meningitis?
Yeah, it affected his kidneys.
January 43, I was drafted for service. I was 19.
During that time, Lee went in service. He was drafted into the Navy. And I was 16.
He joined in 1943. My dad went off to the Navy, and there are pictures of him in different places around the world, and I have a little notebook that shows some of the battles he was in at Okinawa and different places like that.
I wanted to go in the Navy, and they turned me down. They said my body wasn't old enough. I joined up in the Merchant Marines in late 1944. Along, they sent me a letter to report to New York, Sheepshead Bay, New York. That was the experience now. I mean, every weekend we had girls meet us at the gate. Times Square, here we come. And of course, we didn't have to pay for anything. We go into a bar, we didn't have to pay for anything to drink. And Radio City, we didn't have to pay for anything there.
That left Jack and I to do all the chore. We had to carry the water from the spring. We had to chop all the wood, feed the hogs, milk the cows twice a day, and try to go to school when we could.
Sometime later, in the early part of '47, I was looking for adventure. I joined the Navy.
Went down to Richmond to get examined. They sent me back, said, boy, you too young. A few months later, I joined again. And they'd catch it and send me back. But finally, when I was 15, I got my driver's license. I put my age up to 18. At that time, they accepted me in 1947, in August of '47.
I was looking for adventure, and I created my own sometime.
It was hard on my mother, though. Yeah, it was hard on her.
During the war, she had a tough time dealing with it, but she did, you know. Just worried about her boys.
The most outstanding thing that I remember as a child was my parents and the anguish that they went through, you know, with all of them going off to war.
Anyway, she was writing, constantly writing letters, and then trying to get a reply. And of course, the census people would block it out, or mark it, or cut it out. At the end, they start cutting the letters up.
The newspaper was, she just, you know, she had to read everything about the war.
Anyway, my sister recovered this after the war, and she was good enough to let me have it. And anyway, that's 6 of us there, official World War II veterans. George was a week late signing up, so he would have been number 7.
Yeah, I was what I did, I grew up right away because I was scared.
Which was about 19,000 feet, and we didn't have any oxygen or anything, but we thought they were going to send us to Alaska somewhere because we had heavy uniforms, overcoats. We got on the boat. We were headed for the Philippines.
We went on to New Guinea.
Because you go up, you know, you put yourself up and down, you know, paint the ship, paint the bottom of the ship. Didn't even have a roller then. Hadn't invented a roller.
So Dad was gone in the war for about 2 years, I guess.
So I see they signed me to Adak, Alaska, all the way up near the other end of the Aleutian chain. And this one cat, he told me, he said, boy, he said, don't worry about it. There's a woman behind every tree up there. But when I got up, I didn't see no trees. And
went overseas. Went over on the troop carrier. Pope. Took 21 days going over. Wound up in Okinawa.
He was on the ship was the USS Bull, and he was very fond to say that he was on the Bull ship during the war.
USS Bull. And he went in quite a few battles in the Pacific.
They moved us to New Guinea, and then I got dengue fever. Some of our pilots had to parachute into the jungle, and the headhunters brought our men back, though. That's how we named our organization, the Headhunters.
Charles was in the Philippines. He had a tough over there.
Oh, a lot of times it was right bad. A lot of times the ship had to go through a storm, And I was on guard in the upper deck, on the deck. And I had to get underneath of the truck and hold on to the drive shaft so the water wouldn't wash me from under that.
Ralph was over the heavy cruiser, the Chester. The battles, his ship fought 11 major battles. Got in a hurricane. I mean a big hurricane. Waves 200 feet high. And the boat when it would set up on a wave like that, she would be cracking and look over to my left and see some of the cargo ships break in half.
I wasn't sure we was going to make it. The boats was going like this. The boat was going like that.
Went on to the first battle. Was Tarawa. Several piles of bodies in several places. They had to burn them.
When they sent those pilots out, they didn't have any return gasoline to get back.
And none of the Japanese would surrender.
They had orders to go and crash into all our installations, and a whole lot of them did.
And one torpedo bomber came right over my head.
Went through Torpedo Junction, you know, with all the German subs around. And I was only 17. I wasn't driving behind the ears then.
Iwo Jima was a big place that we bombarded.
That place was tore all to pieces. The Germans turned over every ship in the harbor, bombed every ship in the harbor, and turned them over upside down.
We went ashore to observe the damages and so forth. We went in these caves where we could see somewhere up to, 75 to 100 Japanese cremated, gold teeth showing.
This alert sounded, and the Jap planes at night was strafing our camp, and I jumped out of my tent, out of the bed, jumped into the foxhole I had right next to my tent, and I thought I'd almost busted my spine.
The women would take their children to the top of the cliff and jump off when the invasion started. Troops went ashore, and the Japanese had bunkers below ground. They could get some flamethrower people with a tank on their back to go in there. They knew it had to be a breathing hole somewhere for those soldiers. So all they had to do was find a pipe that was sticking up out of the ground, put the flamethrower down in there, and cremate them all. They did that all around the island. Took a while, but they got them all. We lost a lot of men.
Set out these incendiary bombs right at treetop level, and those things set fire to the woods and all. Anyway, we're pretty lucky.
Saipan was a big battle. We lost a lot of Marines there. I know I lost a couple schoolmates there. We lost 3,000 Marines in 12 hours.
Of course, my mother was always scared of getting the telegram of the bad news.
The right side of the island was a mountainous side there where they grew their crops. Tourists on the hill could see the Japanese working the gardens up there. And over here, all the battle was going on.
That was one of the reasons we went to the movies a lot.
To show you the newsreel.
The newsreel. She wanted to see that newsreel. If she could just get a glance of him, she would be tickled to death. And she thought she saw my brother, one of my brothers.
Were you around when she got the coconut?
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah, the coconut, yeah. I remember that, came through the mail.
Lee came a little while. Lee's ship was being converted from a destroyer escort to a APD in Brooklyn, New York. He slipped home one weekend, unauthorized. Then they had a surprise roll call, and they missed him and called the Charlottesville City Police. That's who was looking in.
It was the police at the door, and they had a warrant for Lee because he was AWL.
So they came right there in the middle of the night. Lee had already gone back. He wasn't here but a couple of days. When Daddy went to the bottom of the steps to call us, the first name he called was Lee.
And the police are looking at him, you know, and he says, well, I go through all their names when I call them.
They had these Russian women running the dock, working the docks. they say don't go ashore either because it's bad business. But I went and wound up going to the medical department before they got off of there.
At night, we'd be laying offshore. We had a hospital ship 2 miles out. And the barges would come by with the wounded and the dead. And this fog and everything was so bad they couldn't tell which way they were going. They'd come by and ask directions to the hospital ships. A lot of moaning and groaning in that boat.
We picked up about 50 Japanese officers that had surrendered, and we were taking them back to Japan then. Older men they were, and seemed to be decent people. They wrote the prettiest writing that I ever saw. We'd let them up on deck, you know, for a couple of hours every day.
And the natives, I mean, they just went so-so. I mean, the women went bare-chested and all of that. So the Navy gave out T-shirts for them, you know. And I'd be learning if they didn't cut holes in them and wore the T-shirts, but they cut 2 holes. And that was an experience.
When they signed the treaty in Japan and all that, Charles was right there.
The day after the armistice, we went in with everybody sitting on their guns. Wooden sidewalks and water running down the gutters in the streets or whatever. Pretty good sized town, and there was a lot of people. And they had these wooden shoes or whatever on that wood. Man, they're making a terrible noise going down the streets. And so
one Sunday morning while we was at sea, the chaplain we was having church service. The chaplain asked me to go up on the 3rd deck and get some chairs. And it turned out that the 3rd deck was for the officers and their wives and the families. The MP arrested me, took me to the brig in an 8x10 cell, and 3 days later, the chaplain came down there and discovered me. Wanted to know what I was doing down there, and I told him. I was out of there in 2 minutes, and he couldn't believe that happened. He said he wondered what happened to me.
I'm taking it out at the old home place. Here's my battle stars and stripes. And this is just a picture when I was in training in Bainbridge.
And which one are you?
I don't know, I'm on there somewhere.
They all look alike with that short hair.
All look alike. I'm somewhere on the back road there, they tell me. Yeah, he's right there. That's Lee.
Mm.
This is Bill. That's me, Ezra, Charles.
You can see if you can find me on this
Oh, wow.
Merchant Marine.
That's a picture I seen for the EDAC.
All right, this one got back from Japan. This is my ship here.
That's be at EDAC. That's be at EDAC after those storm.
This is where we docked for a couple, 3 months when we got back. Right here. This is the Oakland Bridge here. Picture of the big guns there.
So how old do you think you are when this picture here is taken right here?
Well, that's not me. That's the end of the chow line on the deck outside. It's not me, no. But it can look like me maybe. In a picture, it could look like me. But there's another one. That's a chow line also. Because that distance, I mean, everybody looks the same. This is my 5-inch gun that I was trained on a 5-inch gun. There's my ship again up there on the right.
My brother Ezra, when he was overseas, he made me a little wallet like, and it was made out of kangaroo skin.
They must have laughed when they got that in the post office. And they Santa Claus to the whole family.
Uh-huh.
Christmas greetings.
I wrote that.
And did you draw this too?
No, I think they must have picked that up because he doesn't draw.
My brother Ralph sent this to me from overseas.
Yeah, after Miss Cason died, my Nancy went through all the stuff, see. Evidently she found that and gave it to me, and I just put it away. And I didn't want nothing to happen to it. Just like the coconut.
In those days, you used handkerchiefs. You didn't have all these Kleenex boxes and tissues.
How did you do that? Did you carve that? How'd you do that?
Yeah, I just had a pocket knife. I carved it with.
That took a while.
Yeah. Yep.
And where's the return address? You got that on there too?
Yeah.
It's right here.
There it is.
Oh, wow. Look at that.
I mailed him to my Aunt Lucy in Washington, D.C.
And has a little verse. Sister of all the girls I ever knew, there never was one like you. You're the nearest, you're the dearest pal I ever knew.
This is an old newspaper from 1945 where they dropped 1,000 tons of incendiary bombs on Tokyo.
I was getting ready to go into Tokyo, and I was really glad that they had dropped the atomic bomb. The atomic bomb killed a whole lot of Japanese, but it saved my life.
And probably your brothers too.
Yeah.
So you were there for the surrender then?
Yeah, I was there.
I survived it, maybe through my mother's prayers. It had something to do with it, you know.
We hardly ever knew when they were going to be arriving on the bus or the train. So they just, they'd get a taxi and come out to the home place.
I was really glad to see my mother and my little sister.
Lee came home, but he had on his white Navy uniform, and he walked up that road and ran into a skunk.
And I was home on leave and went up to Maryland, Andrews Field, to try to hitch a ride in a military plane. And sure enough, I was up there half a day, and this general had to go to Omaha to do some taxes. This was about, I guess, March of 1950. We got here into Indiana. He landed, because it was chow time. Landed at this military base. We got on a bus and went to the chow hall. And while we was eating chow, the base got on the ball. It was a 3-star general, and they came with a car and picked him up. And I was still in the mess hall eating, and I turned around, he was gone. I didn't know what to do. I stood outside at the bus stop, no bus came along. After about 30 minutes, here comes a automobile down the road just flying. License plates had 3 stars on it. Pulled up there and asked me who it was, and I told him. He said, well, get in right quick, said the general. They're getting ready to leave you. So we went back to the airfield, and on the way back, it was about 2 miles or so. All these GIs were saluting me, and I'd salute them back. I was a corporal sitting in the back seat, and they were saluting me. I'd throw it right back to them. But when we got to the airstrip, the plane was, the engines were running and moving down the runway. And we pulled right up beside them, and they stopped. Had to go back. They'd set my baggage off further up the road. Had to go back and get my baggage, come back and get on the plane. And finally we took off. And after we got in the air for about 20 minutes, here comes the general back. He said, this is the first time I've ever had to wait on an enlisted man. I said, well, you did the right thing.
We won the war. That was good. I was hoping that would end all the hostilities. Of course, that didn't happen. But
I was young, dumb, and country when I went in. I learned a lot. I grew up fast. If you don't look out for yourself in the military, you're dead. I know that.
And I went home. And I hadn't been home since the day I left when I enlisted.
My dad was the first Cason to get married, and Mom laughed and said she had to swing it on grapevines to find him back there in the woods. He and my mom were married July 3rd, 1947. Soon after that, all the other guys ended up getting married, and all of them married local girls.
Met Hazel early December. Got married in January, 6 weeks' time. And we just got out of World War II, and I got right into World War III.
I drove a school bus, and I was assigned as a house father. They had boys and girls, of course, at the school. The headmaster's woman was always saying, well, when are you gonna pick one of our girls here and get married?
Till Doug had lucky you are, you found me.
Now. I've got to go back.
So in 51, I married Isabel at the school. She was a senior.
I was married while I was in the Air Force up in Great Falls, Montana. And that was my first wife.
I had a friend, and he was dating, and it was like 4 or 5 of us, 6 of us, to get together and go out and do. You didn't split up and go by yourself much then.
So you grabbed me.
I grabbed you, yeah.
I've been married for 57 years to Barbara.
July 49, I got married.
How'd you meet your wife?
Well, I'd been known her for years, but been pretty close neighbors. I married her on the 19th of July, 1950.
Billy is the only one that's been divorced twice. Well, he married Evelyn and had Betty Lee, and then they were too young, probably. They probably shouldn't have got married. And then he married Iris, who was a wonderful lady, and I really liked her a whole lot. And he had his 2 children with Pat and Calvin with her. Iris and Billy got divorced, and Carolyn and Billy are together. And she's a real sweet lady, and I know they love each other very much.
I met Carolyn at the market, at the city market, farmer's market.
That's be way back 30, 40 years ago. My wife was young then, now I'm old and ugly.
You've been married a long time.
Yeah,
58 years. 58 years.
58 years we've been married, yes.
That's our 25th anniversary. Yeah.
Then in '52, I had the first daughter. '53, I had another daughter. And in '56, I had another daughter. And in '59, I had a son. But so I had grandchildren, and now I got 7 great grandchildren.
In 1949, my youngest daughter, my daughter was born.
58. That was the year I got divorced.
Now, this is Ralph and I when we went to the Bahamas in 1987.
And I have 3 kids here.
February the 8th, 53. My daughter was born.
So how many kids you got?
We have 2.
June 6, 1958, Lee H. Cason Jr. was born, and he died, my mom says 3 days, but always said 2 days, because he died June 8, 1958. That was a painful experience for everybody because no one in our family had that happen.
Raised 4 children. My youngest son passed away a couple of years ago. I got 11 beautiful grandchildren, and I think 9 super good great grandchildren, and lots more coming, I hope.
I do have my great grandson here,
Whoa.
1 year old.
Great grandson. What's his name?
Shucks, I'll have to try to remember. Here's that boy again. He don't look like a boy now, does he? Look like a
He's a pirate.
something other, yeah.
But Saturday night was steak night, always steak night at our house. And we cooked on the grill. And not every Saturday night, but during the summer, we would pretty much always be at one of the brothers' houses. We would have all the kids, and we would come and everybody brought their own steak, and everybody brought something else to share. And our parents would play Rook. That was their card game. And they had some really mean card games. There would be some yelling.
Before the war, I had worked in the grocery store, and I had taken a class in meat cutting.
I went to Newport News, got a job in the Horace E. Dodge Boat and Plane Corporation. And the personnel manager that hired me, he said, "All right, boy, the pay is $62.50 a week." I said, "Mister, I ain't worth no $62.50 a week." He dropped his glasses down. He said, "Boy, you gonna be worth it, or you ain't gonna work here very long."
I was playing corn with a mule.
I worked at the grocery store in Charlottesville.
When I got home, that's the first thing I did. Because my dad had the horses and I had the time. And I dug a foundation for my first house.
I got a job at Hilltop Grocery, opening up that place 6 o'clock every morning.
Of course, while I was at Gleason's store, I only made $1 a day.
And diagonally across the street from that was the Timberlake's drugstore that's still there. And that's where my mom worked. And supposedly she said she caught him and got him to marry her because she made him really, really thick milkshakes. And that was the reason he married her.
After the war was over, I helped my father with some construction for a few months.
When he came home, he had a variety of jobs.
Yeah, I went down to November Hill, which is down there below Stony Point. Yeah, a lot of times they used a push mower, yeah. Finally, I got a mower with a motor on it. And that helped a whole lot.
Finally got a job with an auto parts place.
A friend of my mother's had a farm at Shadwell.
I thought I wanted to be a teller. I didn't want that. Didn't like that for nothing. I had never seen goings on like that goes on in the bank behind the scenes.
I went to school on the GI Bill for parts management, auto parts manager.
I took another year farming for myself.
And Sperry Marine Systems.
So I decided to take a job at a dry cleaner's.
My uncle worked for Advanced Motors, and he repaired radiators. And I worked in radiators there for a year.
Worked briefly at Fitzhugh's drugstore.
I got a job at the jail.
Dying in dry cleaning school in Silver Springs, Maryland, 3 months.
and went and put my application in at UVA. And I was hired pretty quickly. I went to the Darden School first.
And then I went to work for Swift and Company.
Working in a body shop.
And I ended up buying the dry cleaning business. And stayed there for 2 years and went broke, so I just quit.
Yeah, I worked in publication there.
He went to work at Sears and Roebuck for a while. That was up on Main Street.
I took some classes in English country dancing.
To Blue Ridge Sanatorium.
Went to Roanoke to manage a place at Ponce de Leon Hotel.
Is that someplace you worked?
Yeah.
R.D. Wade?
I worked there for 23 years.
Went to work with my friend that had the houseboat.
I got a job at the university housing division.
Mickey Printing Company. Good place to work, good people.
Did a lot of lawn mowing and all.
After that episode, I went back to Fry Springs as manager.
This is Fry.
Fry Springs, Beach Club, still there, looks like the same.
Radiation therapy, where people come for their cancer treatments.
So one thing that my dad and a friend of his did, they had the first soft serve custard in Charlottesville back in the, around between 1947 and 1950.
I sold Fords for about 6 years, at Chevrolets for about 6 years.
I went to work for an insurance company. I worked as an automobile salesman.
My dad was a State Farm insurance agent.
I left and went into the insurance business.
Insurance for a couple of years, and then automobiles for a couple. And went to work for the railroad.
I got my real estate license.
Real estate stuff.
But while I was on the railroad, I started the nursery and landscape business.
What's the story on this sign?
On the sign?
Yeah, what about it?
That's my nursery down on Pantops. The sign was displayed down there for about 15, 20 years. And one time I did, I believe, at least 80% of all the landscape business in Charlottesville in Albemarle County.
I gardened for many years. I sold my stuff at Charlottesville City Box.
This is, that's my peaches about 20, 30 years ago, my peach trees.
My brother George and I, we still do 9 acres.
And here I am, 76 years old and ain't dead yet.
That's hard work.
It is. And I went to have a doctor's appointment last weekend. I told him what I was doing, and he got through. He said, "Well, you're in pretty good shape. Keep on doing it." So,
who painted the sign?
You know, my son had that done. I couldn't tell you, saved my life. Nice job, though.
Yeah, it's great, man. It looks great.
Was your dad involved with the farmers market?
Oh my gosh, yes. He and Billy and Jack and George were the ones that they basically really started it, I guess. I mean, I think George was the one that always had to raise cane to get something done. He was more political and everything, and he went to the city and said, we need to do this.
Be a place where everybody would meet on Saturday morning from 7 till noon and enjoy the arts and crafts and fresh produce. And it turned out just like I said it would.
Friday nights was spent loading up the trucks.
Find anything? taking pictures here now.
Oh, I'm almost done, Billy.
Huh?
Makes people smile when you're getting fresh produce to them and fresh fruit, peaches and apples.
The first television I ever saw was, it was up College Court. I was in there with Lee one day, and there was this thing up on the wall. This awful looking thing up on the wall with all these squiggly looking lines on it. And I had just heard some noise, you know, and we were eating, and Lee said, Nancy, do you know what a television is? I said, well, I've been reading about it in current events at school, you know, but no, I have no. He said, have you ever seen one? And I said, no. He said, well, that's what that is up on the wall. And I just remember saying, well, I don't see much, because it was just so snowy, and somebody was always adjusting it. It's the screen was like this.
But of course, Lee's the older one that's not with us anymore.
My dad died in January of '82. It's because he loved to collect bottles and he loved to collect Indian arrowheads. And when I do think about him coming home, he'd work in the garden sometimes until 9:30 at night, you know, and come home and have dinner warmed up, you know, he would eat then. And my mom would fuss about having dinner so late, but he still came home late most every night. He'd been out in the garden with Jack. He smoked cool cigarettes all the time. I mean, always. That's just something that was part of him. My dad liked to tell stories. He told lots of jokes and stories. And whenever he told a punchline on a joke, he had to repeat it. And if he liked the joke, he might repeat it several times. He would be laughing so hard you could hardly hear him, but he'd be saying the punchline over and over. I would stop by my parents' house lots of times, have a cup of coffee on my way to work in the morning. And I can't remember that last morning if I gave him a kiss goodbye or said goodbye to him. You know, it's just something that I've never been able to remember. And that's, you know, it's not a bad thing. I didn't leave him on a bad note. It's just that you always, you know, so it's always a good thing to say I love you to people when you leave them, because it might be the last time. You never know.
A strange thing happened that day with Hope, his wife. He died on a Friday. And she always went to the grocery store on Friday. So she left and went up Rugby Avenue where they lived, turned left onto Rose Hill Drive, went up to the light at Preston and Rose Hill Drive. And while she was stopping at the red light, Lee went by in front of her. And he was heading to the restaurant to meet George. So that was the last glimpse she had of him.
He was fussing about the traffic, how bad the traffic was. I took him to lunch up at the university to a place called TJ's. We had lunch. We were sitting there talking about the basketball team. All of a sudden, he just did this. He said, something just hit me. Turned and put his head down on the counter. I said, George, I'm gone. I looked and see what was doing. His eyes was fluttering. I took him, eased him down on the floor, and I asked for help.
And he had a brain aneurysm that ruptured the base of his brain.
Rescue squad come in and they finally got his heart back going, but basically he was gone in just 3 or 4 seconds. He was done.
And my mom called and said, George called and something's happened to your dad and they're taking him to UVA. I said, okay, I'll be right there. And I remember telling people in the office, I have to go right now. And I was driving my little Ford Mustang, and there was a pickup truck carrying a load of pallets that fell off kind of right in front of me, and it didn't matter. I just drove right around them and somehow made it. Never even thought about stopping. I got to the house on Rugby, got my mom, went to UVA, and when I got there, and they were bagging him.
I was working. I worked across the hall in radiation therapy in the old hospital, right across from the emergency room. And Dixie, Lee's daughter Dixie, and Carolyn's sister. So she came into my area screaming, and I knew something awful had happened. Maybe an hour in the emergency room. Took him upstairs, and then finally they came out and said there was nothing they could do at all, and that he was on life support already, And so each one of us went alone to say our goodbyes to him.
Everybody came to the hospital. The university hospital had to give us a separate room just for us to sit in.
We had to make up our mind that we were going to take him off of the machine, and of course Hope and the girls had to decide that.
That's been 20-some years ago, and I miss him just much right today.
He was 56. Here he is.
He was a good brother, too, a favorite one. We spent a lot of time together. We hunted together.
And that did an awful lot to us all when he died.
I think it's because I've lost my father that I look for him in my uncles. I was 26, and I thought, even though my mom was still alive and all my other relatives, I felt like an orphan. I felt my world had been turned upside down. You know, I know they all love each other, and I love all of them. And they've all been just wonderful to me. And I hope all their kids appreciate the fact that they still have their dads after all these years.
He was bigger than life. He really was.
We had a little tape, just an audio tape.
That's what I was going to ask. Do you have his voice on tape?
We do have his voice.
You do?
At my mom's house. It's silly.
Lee bought a tape recorder for the family. This is the only known audio of his voice.
Like now,
well,
it's recording.
Start recording. Just talk. You don't have to. Just talk right where you sit.
I don't know what to say.
Get me too, man.
Where's your other one? I don't know.
Just talk to us. Just anything. We can get it off or whatever.
I just want to see how it works.
All right. Well, I like to see how it works, and Mike get me 2, and Hope you get 3, and Lee you get 8. And then how do you appreciate? And all of that stuff.
Should I stop it?
Yeah, if you ain't talking.
Albemarle County wanted me to come to the schools at nighttime to teach adults baskets. All in all, I've made over 800 baskets.
Yeah. Used to call him the basket man on TV.
I picked up this magazine when I started making baskets, and it had pictures of a Nantucket basket in it, and gave the instructions how to make a Nantucket basket. A basket like this.
I was a sports writer for the Adak Daily Southern newspaper. This is a Christmas play of 1948, I think, at Adak. Roy Acuff was there, did the show for us.
And we sold wreaths for 25 cents each.
My mother said I made my first wreath when I was 4 years old. I don't remember. I'm sure it fell apart, and I still do it. I got a machine, 2 machines there in my shed, and I make them by hand too. And of course, back then, that's all we did.
I still made wreaths up until 2 years ago.
But I think my tops was about 375 wreaths. But in the last 3 or 4 years, it's hard for me to make a couple hundred now. And then I need a little help. Because I got a twitch and my hands are not as strong as they used to be.
But I used to make wreaths and sell them on the street.
When did you start making wreaths? How old were you?
Well, I reckon I started when I was about 10 years old. I expect it took me all day to make that, one day.
When I was a small child, we made wreaths in our basement at Christmas time. My mom was a real good wreath maker. She could she could do 20 or something in a day. Fun part was, we had to go and pick the greens to make the wreaths. The princess pine or running cedar is what we used, princess pine, when I was growing up. And we'd have to go somewhere like Appleberry Mountain or somewhere out in the country. We had to go on a Sunday because it was during hunting season, so you couldn't go during the week or on Saturday because you'd get shot maybe. So
they said it was hard on the fingers.
It is. It is. And Jack's finger doesn't heal from one year to the next anymore. But the wreaths are just sort of they're a family tradition.
So where's the wreath making machine?
I'll come up, we go there.
Okay.
Don't take a picture of that.
No, I didn't.
Got to get that over to the recycling.
Nah, I didn't do it.
All right, here it is, what I do. We get a ring. what I do is when I get my bunch ready, I got 100 some spruce trees here that I tip to bake, and then I get boxwood, lots and lots of boxwood. I put the bunch. Yeah, that's
You got it okay?
I put the bunch in there, and then press the paddle. Clamp it down, go all the way around.
And it just turns.
I just turn it as I put the bunch in. I got a couple here that goes last year. I wanted you to see. Heck. Well.
You got some up on the deer head up there.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, these I didn't sell. That's pretty pie. But they pretty. I might
Pretty.
sell them this year.
That's gorgeous.
They were great. That's pretty green stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And then again, this guy got that on the ball. He did that thing for me in 5 minutes. Charged me $5.
That's great.
No. But he got me kind of ugly, man. That's me at City Market about 30 years ago. That's a thing. That's me. They did a thing. Somebody did a thing on 30 years back at City Market.
So what happened to the Cavaliers? You use them as a dartboard? The Cavaliers here?
Yeah, that thing is deteriorated some kind of bad over the years, but you know, I still recognize a lot of them.
Jack, he was a pretty good baseball player. Him and George was a pretty good baseball player.
These old seed beds. These were at Miller's drugstore downtown on the mall where Miller's is now, the restaurant.
And also we sold a lot of mistletoe too. We made money on mistletoe.
I got a hobby of making walking sticks.
After we got married, then we got a chance to join a square dance group.
I was always musical inclined. I would get hold of pipe pans and pans and bang them together and worry my mother to death, you know. And finally my mother brought me a harmonica, 10 cents. And my mother could play a little. She gave me a little bit of tip, had to start off. And she said, keep on puffing and blowing till it strikes. And so I laid underneath that bus. I was trying to get away from Jack and George. And I laid underneath the school bus and kept on blowing that harmonica and kept on and striking. Finally I struck a tune one day.
Your brothers and sisters, do they play?
They came pair of tunes.
You're the one. You're the one.
It's hard for me to tune this thing, because I got one bad ear. You sound halfway tuned up, you.
Clocks, right?
Yeah, I like clocks.
I have to brag, I did pretty good. I was a horseshoe champion. Turn your damn book down. The kid wants to get her over there, I think. You got the kid? Oh, the lady, oh, lady, oh, lady.
This is my main clock right here. This clock runs good. That and up that don't run exactly right all the time, so that's right. They stopped that. That and over that, there's something wrong with that one. It'll run good sometimes.
You gotta spend a lot of time winding up clocks.
Yeah. I was 7 or 8 clocks, yeah.
You got 8 just in here.
Yeah, 8 in here.
I take that back. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. 10. You got 10 in here. And then there's one over there. That's 11.
I didn't realize I had that many.
That's just in this room. So ain't no doubt about what time it is for you.
No.
Keep revising my count. There's 12 in the room. Oh, and then you get one up there. 13. Okay.
What does that thing do?
That kicks my heart every month.
Where'd you learn woodworking?
Well, I just picked it up. It took me 10 years on that one. Tilt top.
Oh, neat.
This one over here, there's two of them.
Uh-huh.
With the carved feet. I had to do that to start off with a drawing knife by hand.
Whoa.
How are you, George?
Doing good, how about you?
How are you? Still here? What's left of you?
That's what's on. He's one of my favorite grandsons.
Because he's helping you work, man.
You better believe it.
Okay, so the guitar tuning part wasn't going too well, so I brought my son over to tune Billy's guitar. This quickly evolved into a jam session.
That boy wants to jam. I told you he wanted to jam. Huh? Wait a minute, see if I catch another song here. I think I'm gonna have to go to A on that one. Can you do A? Can you do A all right? Yep. That's a hymn. You know that? I saw the light. And that's A, man.
Great, man.
They ought to shoot a man when he's 60. and I should have been shot, 17 years ago.
Charlottesville is to me, is a special place. We're a pretty close-knit family, you know.
Well, you got a bunch of brothers, you know, we all kind of look out for each other.
You can tell about the watermelon in the river.
We'll get around to that. It never did cross my mind to leave Charlottesville, to be honest.
Charlottesville was a jewel. It was a beautiful place.
It's an awful lot of growth in 50 years.
Yeah, I think it's a whole lot better now than it was when I was growing up.
Wow.
Well, I have her to take care of me. See, you're my wife and my life.
I see it's got 4 pictures.
Oh, yeah.
Of him at different ages. And he belonged to the American Legion. He belonged to DAB.
I can't keep up with the modern times. So back in the days it was simple.
Then you had the movies in the bowling alley, and there wasn't a whole lot more, you know. At our family reunion, this is all of us,
Wow.
all 6 of us now. It's mighty hard to say 6 anymore.
Yeah, isn't
we
it?
always used to saying 7. But I don't think I could have been any luckier person.
They stayed in Charlottesville. They stayed right here. And I cannot believe that we grew up, and honestly, I tell people all the time, it was like living in Mayberry RFD, because we had wonderful childhood experiences. We would visit each other in the evenings in the summer and play with my cousins. You know, we were within 3 miles of each other, probably all of us. They're good citizens, and they're part of that greatest generation that they talk about, because it was never any doubt that they would do those things.
Hey, everybody. You're good, isn't it?
Very good.
You got me.
Yeah, I got
I think I
you.
didn't
man.
get you.
All right, he wants to give me 2.
I bring us the end of the story.
All right, and then the elderly people can come and take pictures.
The elderly people.
I hope you've enjoyed this family history. As for me, I thank them for allowing me into their lives and for sharing their stories. I think the more we learn about each other, the better off we are.
Togetherness. So it's going to have to be like.
All right, y'all, my children, come down here.
I said 85, 52. We have a 52. 53. I was worried.
You been doing all right, Ed?
All right, now we need the other kids. Come on, and they can line up down here. All the way right there. Yeah,
Right there, man.
come on, pick a side. Stand right here. Stay right here. You better come on. All right, everybody look that way. Okay? All right, everybody turn and look at the cameras. There we go.
And y'all stay where you are. I'm taking the section.
Don't anybody move. Don't nobody move.
Nobody move. Nobody move.
Don't anybody move. Which way are we supposed to be looking? Anywhere. Look at the sky.
Do you know turkey in the straw, turkey in the hay?
All right.
You're the oldest guy here today?
Yeah.
How old are you, Ezra?
I'm 89.
Life's good.
If I make it to my next birthday, I'll be 90.
Beautiful.
You like us, huh?
That was very nice.